Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're looking at something pretty amazing, how just changing the medium can completely transform how we learn. We're taking what might literally be one of the driest subjects on Earth and figuring out how to make it not just digestible, but honestly, genuinely fascinating. So, I want you to ask yourselves a question. How do you make complex, abstract concepts absolutely unforgettable? We've all been there, right? Sitting in some stuffy classroom, just staring at a whiteboard covered in dense, impossible jargon, feeling your eyes glaze over while a lecturer drones on and on. It's a totally universal struggle. But what if we could actually fix that draining passive experience? What if we could make that information really stick? Section 1. The problem with accountant. Now, to figure out how to revolutionize learning, researchers needed a really tough proving ground, and they chose an internal auditing course. I mean, for decades, accounting education has relied heavily on these traditional lectures that basically force passive listening. They push these highly abstract concepts, and honestly, they produce a ton of anxiety for students who are just trying to scrape by. But, the digital era demands a totally different ecosystem. We're talking active engagement, concrete visual examples, and on-demand access. Because modern students, they don't just want to memorize facts to pass a test. They need to actually thrive. Section 2. The motion graphic solution. Recognizing this massive disconnect in modern learning, an innovative team of researchers over at Yala Rajabhat University in Thailand decided to design a targeted intervention. And this brilliantly illustrates what they came up with, actual frames from 10 custom-developed motion graphic lessons. Instead of just handing out another dense textbook, they took core auditing concepts and synthesized them into dynamic 3 to 6 minute animated stories. They combined motion, color, text, and sound to take these invisible, abstract accounting rules and turn them into concrete visual lessons. The best part? Students could easily digest them, interact with them, and literally just hit replay whenever they needed to. Now, to make sure these weren't just, pretty pictures, but highly effective educational tools, the team rigorously developed them using what's called the ADD model. It's basically a systematic 3-step approach. First, pre-production, to define the concepts and map out storyboards. Then, production, where they used industry-standard Adobe software to build the actual animation. And finally, post-production, for seamless audio integration. This really rigorous process ensured they hit incredibly strict academic standards before they ever reached a single student screen. Section 3. The science of learning. Okay, so why exactly does an animation work so much better than a textbook? Well, it really comes down to the cognitive theory of multimedia learning. Essentially, our brains operate on dual channels. We process visual and auditory information entirely separately. When our eyes and ears sync up, we just learn much faster. Add in the concept of spaced repetition, which is basically letting students independently hit replay on these short graphics at their own pace, and you get this massive boost to long-term memory. And, most importantly, it reduces cognitive load. Think of your brain kind of like a computer. If you have way too many tabs open, it crashes, right? Motion graphics elegantly close all those unnecessary tabs so you can just focus on the core message. And a really crucial point here is how this ties into constructivist theory. This is a learning framework where learners aren't just treated like empty vessels waiting to be filled up. Instead, they actively construct their own knowledge through experience. By bringing in these motion graphics, the researchers forced a fundamental shift. They moved the classroom away from that traditional, teacher-centered approach and created a highly active, student-empowered experience where the learner is firmly in the driver's seat. Section 4. Putting it to the test. To see how this actually holds up in the real world, the researchers orchestrated a clear showdown. They took a sample of Bachelor of Accountancy students and split them right down the middle. So you have 34 students in the experimental group who got the new motion graphics alongside traditional teaching. And pitted directly against them was a control group of 34 students stuck exclusively with those old-school traditional lectures. And to make absolutely sure this was a perfectly fair fight, they tested everyone before the instruction even began. Both groups started out with an almost identical baseline pre-test score of around 39.8, so nobody had a head start. The playing field was completely level, which meant any difference at the very end would be entirely due to how that information was presented. Section 5. The staggering results. All right, consider this the climax of the experiment.
After the course wrapped up, the control group finished with a respectable average score of about 62.18. But the experimental group, the students who actually had access to the motion graphics, absolutely crushed it with an average score of nearly 85. I mean, that is a statistically significant, enormous jump in achievement, and it was achieved simply by changing the medium.
The researchers also measured efficiency using the E1/E2 academic standard. You can think of E1 as how well students understand the material during the actual learning process, and E2 as their final testing outcome. Now, the required passing baseline is usually an 80-80. This motion graphic media completely smashed that benchmark, hitting an 82.40 for in-process learning and an 85.60 on those final outcomes. So it works beautifully while they learn and for sure when they are finally tested. But it wasn't just about getting higher grades. Check out this powerful quote right from the study's conclusion. Students using motion graphics reported the highest level of satisfaction. Beyond all the hard data, this intervention significantly reduced student anxiety. It took what is notoriously a difficult, stress-inducing accounting topic and made it genuinely highly satisfying and enjoyable to learn.
Section 6. The bigger picture.
So, we have to tether this micro success to its macro global impact. Why does a study on accounting students in Thailand matter to the rest of the business world? Well, because mastering internal audit directly fosters transparency, accountability, and robust risk management. When students deeply understand these complex rules, rather than just rotely memorizing them, they become the vigilant professionals who ensure ethical, sustainable corporate governance far beyond the classroom walls. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought for our explainer today. If a few well-designed motion graphics can completely transform internal auditing, which is arguably one of the most notoriously dry and difficult subjects on Earth, what other archaic, complex subjects could be totally revolutionized by simply changing how we showed the information? I'll leave you to think about that.